testify, in Madison in Judge Crabb's court, and he was down there, and they were trying to figure out interfering with the civil rights. And they said there was no racism going on. One thing Tom did, he videotaped everything, and those people happily got right on camera, and he just sort of calmly went right in there and videotaped everything they were saying and doing, and he showed that to Judge Crabb. Once she saw that, boom, it just changed her opinion real quickly. She didn't have to hear any more testimony, and then the civil rights came. Those guys got, if they were going to interfere, it's going to be $200,000 per individual. Right after that, you didn't see any more people down in those boat landings anymore when that came down from that point there too. But there was a lot of people, that contributed in many different ways. Just the people, sometimes you hear people talking up here, but there's so many people that did little small things, not small things, but contributed in many, many different ways. And never really knowing exactly that what they were doing at that time was going to have an impact in the next generation. And so even our children here, the things that you do today will have an impact on the next generation. You might not see in our lives or your life that these things are going to change. Just by doing something, you're going to see a change, within that next generation. It might not come next week or next year or 5 years or 10 years, but it's going to come down. It's going to work its way around. So they always say what goes around comes around, and that by doing all those things, they fully make their circles. They come around. You kind of plant those seeds, and they germinate, and they start to sprout. And we see all the benefits from those types of activities that we did. They mentioned about Vita Stone. Vita was a person that had a lot of individuals that went to school. And she was primarily one of the reasons that I came to school too. I went to school in Mount Scenario there. And Vita was, she's always recruiting people to go to education and doing something to empower them, to get them to see things broadly and become educated and do things. And she was always involved with Indian activism, with education, and doing a lot of different things. And so I had a lot to this older lady there. She did a lot. She worked with Indian families. I used to always tease her all the time. When we were at Mount Scenario one year, one of the Oneida guys came in there, and she had a list of this field, some kind of field trip we were going on, and she kept checking the list to see how many people were going. And one of the Oneida guys, he's always teasing. He went up there and he put a guy named Ben Dover. He put Ben Dover up there. So she'd always come in there and check the list, and she walked in there and she said, "Who's Ben Dover?" He said, "Vita, you know him." "I don't know no Ben Dover." "Sure you do." "No, I don't. I never heard no Ben Dover." And she said, "Well, just say his name a couple times. You remember him." Ben Dover, Ben Dover. And I started saying that, and she, "Oh!" I used to tease her all the time. I always think about her in that story there too. So Vita, many people know her, many younger people hadn't had the opportunity, but I think her story, as well as many other individuals' stories, continue to live on. And I think that's part of one of our cultural perspectives is through stories. We've always learned through stories, to tell stories. And in the stories, those stories live on, and they're part of our history, part of how we maintain the cultural identity, cultural history, our ceremonies. Those are all a part of that process by telling those particular stories. And I think we need to continue to do that all the time. So our children learn how to tell stories, because they were very good storytellers, and they had to be able to get up to express themselves in that way so everybody could understand and clearly understand what they were trying to convey, this story, to the next generation. So we have to teach our children how to be storytellers and to get up and be able to speak. I'll do that with my nephews. I'm going to get up and say something now. I don't want to get up there and say something. Get up there and say something. Then they get up and say something. They don't want to do it, though, but you have to kind of force them to get up and do it. You got to be able to express yourself in that way. I want to say my friend Rick back there, when he mentioned Ozawanakwad, my spiritual name, also Menominee, not Nalgesic. I was also adopted into the Menominee tribe years ago, and also then put on their ceremonial drum years ago. And his name was Center Sky. His name was Rattler, Gary Pamaska. And so when I was adopted into the tribe, they did it in Ojibwe, and that's part of a cultural identity too. So that becomes expanded my extended family a great deal. So I still go down there, and I'm still part of those ceremonial drums, and that's part of my large extended family there too. And so that's just part of our cultural identity, expanding that and continuing to expand that process there too. So I wanted to just say that much, about the tribal courts, and that it has helped, a great deal in tribal communities and still continues. And we start to take on, as Bucko was talking about, in child welfare. Tribal clerk administrator, called me up on the way up here and said, we got an emergency custody that we have to take place. Can you be over here this afternoon to do this? And it doesn't have to go to a circuit court. It comes to our own tribal court. And she knows that, one of my pet peeves in there too, if there's a tribal child, has to be in a tribal home or Indian home that they approve of, and doesn't go out to a non-Indian home. It's just something that we do in tribal court, and it's real strict, and that's something I adhere to. And that's something that we have, as tribal court, that we are our own self-determining to empower ourselves to make that kind of decision, for our children there too. So those are things that I think in the tribal court that we have done a great deal, work, and we have to persevere. Sometimes people look at us as differently. We have different lawyers, we have different judges. In some tribal communities, judges from the circuit court don't want to adhere to what's going on with the tribal judges or their decision making. Hopefully they would like to ignore it. But Judge Eaton in Ashland County, he works very well, with our court. Irv calls him up and teases him periodically and says different things to him. He's come down to my court, and we've held court at the same time in the court. He's brought his people down here, his whole staff, and they came and set up at our tribal court. And so you see these types of things occurring, and that's because they take a look and they see our court differently, and rather as something that they can see with respect. And so it's sort of a comedy, and those things are happening increasingly more in our tribal courts as we take on more jurisdictions and doing more and more of those types of activities. But it takes a lot of courage to be able to do that and learn more, and also we make mistakes, in that way. Before I go, I just want to say one more Irvin story. It was when he had his first judge. He used to be down in the old Indian communities, the St. Mary's, the old school down there. And before they tore it down, the tribal headquarters was down there, and the tribal court was down there. And they were telling me that when Judge Sulier, when he went out to Reno for get trained as a judge, and came back, and he had his first court case, and he was hearing it, and the prosecutor got up and said this was the individual infraction, what he did, and here's the consequence, and got done with that. And Judge Sulier kind of looked at him and said, we'll take a 20-minute recess, and I'll make my decision. And he got up and started walking out, and then the prosecutor and the other side was sitting there, and he said, Judge Sulier, don't you want to hear the other side before you make a decision? Oh, yeah, we'll hear from him before I make a decision here. I think about Irvin in that way there too. I like to, just for individuals, say, Minwaajimo nagungun to the way gani manig, but mawada nang gig ungun manidug. Gagagi zumaging gagwe jumagwe wene, Vegas negotiate, Juena Mom and we do call the Shanabe dug in the way Magna Nungum. The gig no mawishin kia mishkabe mad and mad ze win Nungum. I just want to say that I ask the Creator and all His helping spirits, to look down upon us in a good way here today, and that you have learned something, you have just a little dot of knowledge. That people are traveling, the ones who are also leaving and traveling, that they get home in a safe way, that the Creator watch over them in a good way, and that things are, if they left their home in a good way, that's how they find their home. And each for every one of you here too, as you get ready to go home and travel later on this afternoon, and for all individuals who are on the way home now too. We think about that for those individuals there too. So I'll make which visit the mok. You.